Well, thank you ever so much for that warm welcome, and apologies if I've delayed your lunch, which I think I might have done. Can I first of all say that I am delighted to come and address the conference today. I want to put in context what I'm doing today to try and draw out a theme, which is to be absolutely clear that what we need in this country is a united left alternative to Labour, and we need trade unions who are prepared to unite and defend their members, not look over their shoulder about whether they're embarrassing their friends in government. And that's an important theme, because after I've spoken here today, I'm going down to Conway Hall to speak to the Labour Representation Committee, particularly to support John McDonnell, and to try and draw out and entrench not just my personal support for John McDonnell and my union support for John McDonnell, but to try and encourage him and those people in the Labour left to do more, to look out, to work with those outside of the Labour Party, to really ensure that we can have the united alternative that we need. But let me just start by restating some basic sort of issues. I've spoken at many respect events over the past few years, and I've always tried to develop a theme that we need industrial unity to fight industrially against the attacks that members are facing of trade unions, whether in the public sector or private sector, but we need political unity to offer people hope that there is something better for them on the horizon than the failed old tired politics of the main parties who increasingly are merging into one. And that those of us who care passionately about the future, particularly about future generations, need to redouble our efforts to ensure that they have something to look forward to, something to inspire them, something to believe that politics can actually change. And I think, therefore, we have got to look at the opportunities in front of us now and be committed to seize those opportunities. And I think, therefore, it's useful to look very briefly at the experience of my own trade union and other public sector trade unions to illustrate the point. Because every time I have met government ministers, and I have to say sadly, when I have sat down with many trade union leaders, and I raise the problems that trade unionists and public sector workers, and particularly civil servants, face at the moment, when I finish, there is a real consistency of the answer I'm always told. And I've been told this personally by Gordon Brown, I've been told it personally by Jack Straw, and I've heard it in the TUC General Council, more on that in a minute. And their answer is, no matter how much you moan, no matter how bad you say it is, what we put to you is the other side will be worse. When you think about it, it's quite a logical position, isn't it? Because probably most people would think in their heart of hearts, yes, the Tories will be worse than Labour. But actually what I think it tells us is the political establishment, and particularly the leaders of the Labour movement, as they see themselves politically in the Labour Party, actually are now arrogant to believe that they can continue to get away with telling us, no matter what we do, no matter how bad it gets, every fifth year when you get the chance, you know you'll have to vote Labour because otherwise you get the Tories. And I think that arrogance, that inbuilt assumption that workers will always vote for Labour, actually invites them to become more right-wing, more neoliberal, and stick the boot in more and more because they think we'll fall for it. And comrades, my starting point is, unless we are prepared to say we aren't going to fall for it, unless we aren't prepared to say no, even in the short term, if that means making some difficult decisions, in 5 years it will be the same, in 10 years it will be the same, in 15 years it will be the same. How demoralising and depressing a thought is that? So I think what unites us in this room today, and I'd say unites people, particularly the people down at the LRC that I'll speak to later, is that many people actually believe there is something better than that. What we have to tease out, however, is it's no good just believing in something better and wishing for something better. We have to work to make that something better actually happen. And I think sometimes that means we've got to remember we should still get angry. We should still get annoyed, and we should still get outraged about the things that are happening. Let me give you a couple of small examples of what's happening in the civil service that make, I think, a wider picture. 3 weeks ago in Stirling in Scotland, local churches gave out 134 food vouchers to members of the public in Scotland who were entitled to social security payments but couldn't get them because there wasn't enough staff working in the DWP to make the payments. Crisis loans that by their definition are the most urgent social security payment you can get, that should be dealt with within 24 hours, were taking 5 weeks. 5 weeks because they're cutting 40,000 civil service jobs. Now, can you believe that in the year 2007, churches are giving food vouchers to people who are entitled to gyro checks? It has happened within the last 3 weeks. Let me give you another example about how appalling what is happening in welfare is. Government cuts 40,000 jobs in social security, recognises it can't then deliver all the things it wants to do. So as we are sitting here now, they are giving contracts to charities and private sector companies to deal with welfare payments to the long-term unemployed and lone parents. And when they deal with the long-term unemployed and lone parents, they will be paid by results, introducing the profit motive in delivering welfare to the most vulnerable and needy people in our society. I mean, what is this? This is not Bush's America. This is not people in America, the neocons, who you might think, well, I expect it. This is a Labour government, a decade into power, asking charities to deliver the welfare state. Now, I tell you what, I still get angry when I see it. I get angry when I meet the people who have to suffer and have to get the food vouchers, and I get angry about the members who work for my union who absolutely despair about wanting to deliver a better service, but that is what they are left with having to do. One small example. Replicated across health, across the privatisation of education, across redundancies in our health service, about people dying of infections in hospitals because we aren't keeping hospitals clean because of lack of real investment. Let's look at the scandal that sees £3 billion a year paid to private sector consultants now in the civil service alone. What about the scandal of recently that has been highlighted, the EDS, one of the world's top computer companies, signing an IT contract with the government for revenue and customs that had a clause inserted in it that said if they ever faced a penalty for poor performance, they had to be guaranteed a future contract in another government department. Now, these are contracts that quite clearly are corrupt and are actually akin to a printing press of taxpayers' money being siphoned directly from us into the pockets of fat cats who are millionaires and billionaires. And this isn't a vision of some society in the future. This is actually happening now. And it explains why public sector workers are told they are the cause of inflation and that they have to tighten their belts. Never mind if they have second jobs. Never mind if they don't have a holiday. Never mind if they worry at night about which bill to pay. You tighten your belt, you take a pay cut. When billions are paid in city bonuses, when the average pay to the FTSE top 100 directors has risen in a year from 2 million to 3 million. Now, I'm not an economist, but I think that may have more to do with inflation than the public sector workers who cannot afford the things that they should be able to take for granted. And therefore, I stand here without any doubt, without condemning the illegal wars, without condemning the deportations of people who should be allowed to stay and work in this country, without condemning the racism and fascism fuelled by the policies, I would argue, of this government, without talking about the 101 other things that I could stand here for hours on end. I'll give you a small example, but it makes a point. If this is as good as politics can get, then I think we have to pack up our bags and decide to go somewhere else. But of course, it is not as good as politics can get. Because if we believe in redistribution of wealth, if we believe in policies for the millions, not the millionaires, if we believe in a society when everyone should have the right to a decent job, that there shouldn't be racism, there shouldn't be exploitation, then we have to dedicate ourselves to build it. And I therefore want to really bring what I have to say to this sort of conclusion. How do we get from where we are now to something better? Well, first of all, let me say publicly here, if you are in a trade union, you have to redouble your efforts in your branch, in your workplace, in your region, on your executive committee, to hold to account the leaders of so many of the unions in this country who are looking the other way when their members are desperate for them to lead a fight. And I tell you what, that is not an idle thought. I have spent months with colleagues, some of whom I can see in this room, doing large meetings and small meetings the length and breadth of Britain. And when I talk to public sector trade unionists, whether they're lecturers, health workers, teachers, civil servants, local government workers, firefighters, they all understand it isn't rocket science to recognise if the government collectively attacks us all, we should collectively stand up and defend ourselves. Now, in PCS, we've got quite a simple view of life. It's just that we think it would be a whole lot easier if we could collectively defend ourselves. But we don't decide. Until that has happened, there's nothing we can do. Because my view of life is it's better to fight with others. But if you have to fight on your own, you have to fight on your own. And therefore we have more than any other union arguably in Britain, over a long period of time, continually be prepared to ask our members to vote for action. There isn't any other union in Britain that can say what I can say today, which is we have had, when we hadn't had an industrial action ballot in a generation across the civil service, I've had 4 national strike ballots in 3 years, and the one we announced 3 weeks ago delivered the highest majority of the lot for escalated industrial action across the whole of the civil service. But we have seen that others have been prepared to fight, and let me publicly say here, I think the brave men and women in our postal services, members of the CWU, showed that they were not cowed, they were not put off when perhaps some of them felt they could have had a clear line, possibly coming from people within their own union, let alone people across the rest of the trade union movement. They were prepared to fight. Days and days of strike action, and not just official strike action. How heroic was it to see in Liverpool, for a week, unofficial strike action by workers who said, we are not being bullied by the boss and we don't care what people say, we're on the picket line and we should support those people. So all around me I see inspiration. I see people prepared in small disputes, prepared to struggle. In large disputes, when they're asked, they're prepared to vote for action. And we have got to ensure that we bring all of the unions together to maximise our efforts. And along the way we should remember that there are people who pay a very high price for being principled trade unionists. I don't know if Karen is in the room, but let me say, Karen, at our National Executive Committee next week, I believe we will unanimously agree a proposal I will make to make a substantial financial donation to your campaign and to make sure that when we say the slogan, an injury to one is an injury to all, we mean it. And let me say on another stage, a union that has not often been the most popular in the trade union movement, the Prison Officers Association, the union who took illegal, unofficial industrial action. When the General Secretary phoned me up at 6:30 in the morning when I was on holidays in West Wales to tell me they were about to have an illegal strike. And I say this, the POA may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I take my hat off to a union that's not only prepared to take illegal industrial action, who has been in the High Court more than a dozen times in the last 12 months, and who currently face further court action and punitive fines that could remove that union from existence. And I'll say here what I have said on numerous public platforms. It is no good trade union leaders offering solidarity with the POA unless they turn it into reality. And I'm prepared to make another public announcement. If the POA are fined, then my union and every other should put their hands in their pockets and pay the fine and tell the government that we stand by those who are prepared to stand up for their members. So colleagues, industrially, we see every day people who are prepared to take up the cudgels and fight. But yesterday, there was a meeting of all the public sector unions at the TUC. A meeting called because PCS, recognising that as the year went on this year, even though the fantastic opportunity existed for coordinated industrial action, it wasn't going to happen. The time went on, settlements were reached, other unions decided they couldn't do it. So what we said is, OK, let's remember what happened in pensions, on pensions in 2005. We met in the November before to plan our action for the following year to show the government we meant business. So yesterday all the unions met. It's good that the TUC is about to launch a campaign that essentially is going to produce documents and leaflets to say it's not fair. Well, we know it's not fair. And it's good that they want to say it's not fair. But we need to talk about what we're going to do to bring this unfairness to book. We have called again for coordinated strike action. I'm delighted that the National Union of Teachers hopefully is now on a trajectory to ballot its members for industrial action early in January. Although my union has finally forced the government, after 3 years, into talks to try and resolve the issues at the heart of our dispute, they aren't going to solve the issue of below inflation pay rise. And even if we get a settlement to our issues around job security, and I hope we do, we will be first in the queue for coordinated industrial action on pay next year. But comrades, there was a problem, because a lot of the other unions were saying they hoped it could happen. But there had to be many barriers overcome first. And the first one they erected is, unless you've got unity in your sector, you cannot participate in coordinated action. Well, I tell you what, I think we've got to come here to say, we don't want to just hear about the problems, we want to find the solutions. And we do not believe there should be any excuse that should let any public sector union find a reason to look the other way when Gordon Brown has just announced pay restraint until 2011. It is not hard, comrades. Let us dedicate ourselves to getting teachers, lecturers and all public sector workers on the picket line on the same day. If they can do it in France, we should be able to do it in the UK. Just finishing now, am I right, yeah? But as I've said on many occasions, industrial resistance is not enough. Industrial resistance in the here and now is critically important. We want to stop the bullying boss in the workplace. We want to stop the government attacking trade unionists. And we may win many victories, but it won't stop them coming back the year after that and the year after that. So we need political change. And we need to inspire people that that is possible. Now, since I've been General Secretary of PCS, I've had the pleasure and the privilege to share platforms, John, you've usually been on them, for the last 5 or 6 years in many areas, giving my support to those who sought to build an alternative. The Socialist Alliance in England and Wales, the Scottish Socialist Party, actually proof, in my view, that with a fairer electoral system and a radical cutting edge, it nails the lie that people will not vote for left-wing parties. 6 MSPs elected in the Scottish Parliament, 5 Greens, meaning 10% of the first Parliament in Scotland made up of people who were to the left. And if it can happen in Scotland, it can happen here. And then, of course, there was the foundation of respect, something I have been more than happy to support since it has been in existence, and I was as happy as anyone in this room at the election of George Galloway and the election of Respect councillors, whether it be in Preston, in East London or any other part of the UK, because I think that gives people hope and it gives them inspiration. And therefore it is with a degree of sadness that I find myself today being asked to speak to 4 different left events in London. There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'll try and keep a serious point. Now, I am speaking at 3 of those events. I'm speaking at the Labour Representation Committee, and I am going to go and speak later on to the Socialist Party. I have declined to speak to the Respect Renewal Conference in London. And I want to explain why. You see, I'm a passionate believer, and I have said it for years, that we have to have unity on the left if we are to have any chance. Who is the happiest person in this country who picks up the papers or watches the TV to see that some people have left Respect and there's a split in the left? I think it's Gordon Brown. You see, I think Gordon Brown, he must think it's Christmas every day. He knows he's attacking the working class, he knows he's attacking pensioners, he knows he's continuing Blair's policies, and he looks to those who articulate a better view, and he sees that they split, and he sees that they can't agree, and he rubs his hands in glee, and he thinks, when can I next use that phrase, you know the other lot will be worse than me. Well, I tell you what, we've got to not let him get away with it. So my appeal here today is for unity. But it is unity based on tolerance, on accepting difference, on a core programme that addresses working class issues, but there can never be unity in a party to the left of Labour if people attack and witch hunt other socialists. And I say that from a point, and I don't hide it. John and I do not agree on all political positions. My good friend Martin Smith at the back have had many disagreements. But I think we understand that if we all want to find what we disagree on, we can have an interesting discussion, a few beers, a couple of curries, it can be very interesting. But actually, we're interested in finding what we can agree on, and a programme that takes us forward. That has to be, we respect everybody, everybody's view, no matter where their background comes from. No matter what their particular interest or their particular campaign that brought them to this question of needing an alternative to Labour. We tolerate difference, we welcome debate, but we act in unity and we do not attack other people for the views that they hold. And I tell you what, comrades, I think if we understand what we need to do, we can see today as not some desperate position that we all dreaded and we put our heads in the sand and feel sorry for ourselves. We can see it perhaps as an opportunity to get a few things clearer and move on stronger. And I want to say this to you. But I don't think that means, I believe, and I'll be honest about it, I've said it before, that what we've got in this room is the finished article, that this is the alternative to Labour that will take us into pastures new. It isn't the case. And I hope we all accept it isn't the case. But what it is a vital part of creating that something new. And if we analyse the splits that have taken place in the Scottish Socialist Party, that has happened today with people leaving Respect or other things, I think there's a bit of a common theme. What do we need to ensure that those people who want to take us off into a different direction are stopped from doing it? We need the organised labour movement, and we need the trade unions to be involved to give us a bedrock on which to go forward. And that's why I don't come here as some hopeless idealist, hoping for the best and crossing my fingers. I come here with a view of how perhaps that can take us forward. It means in the trade union movement, we have to confront those who tell us loyalty to Labour is above all. Let me share this shocking thing with you. TUC General Council, July. TUC going off to meet Gordon Brown in Downing Street. 18 of us went to see Gordon Brown. Funny story, I was the first to arrive. I was half an hour early. The PM was meeting the Secretary General, so they asked me, Mr. Serwotka, do you mind sitting in the Cabinet room to wait? I said, fine. I sat at the Cabinet table on my own for half an hour. I told my kids they thought I was running the country. I have to say, I'm sat there for half an hour, the TUC came in. Before we got to that meeting, General Counsel Brendan Barber asked everybody for a list of things they want to raise with Gordon Brown. Job cuts, pay restraint, all the other things that people were worried about. One trade union leader, who I won't name, Joint General Secretary of the biggest union in Britain, it's narrowed the field down. He's from somewhere I lived for 12 years up north. He said, can I stop you all here? This is ridiculous. We are all forgetting the priority that overrides everything is the re-election of our government. Now, I think that tells us at its heart of what we have to understand we're up against. My answer to that is, I'm sorry, my priority is defending PCS members who are being kicked from pillar to post. So in conclusion, we know in the Labour movement there are those who will always put loyal to Labour first. We know we've got to confront the total ridiculous contradiction of members going on strike 1 minute because they're being attacked and in the next minute funding the party that attacks them. We have got to raise the question that members' political affiliations should be democratic and decided by members and should go to those they think best represents their interests. It's why the PCS Make Your Vote Count campaign, although not radical in attaching itself to any political party, is truly radical, because it treats all parties the same, gives everybody equal access, and allows local candidates to tell their local constituents where they stand, and we can publish the answers. So what we need is to build this alternative, and I'll finish with these points of what I hope is something inspiring. We look around. We see the FBU and the RMT, no longer affiliated to Labour, looking around politically to see how they can take forward issues, possibly even considering the issue of standing or supporting candidates. We know in other unions, in the Postal Workers Union and others, a genuine debate starting about people's alliance to Labour which doesn't allow for anything else. We see in Liverpool the fantastic prospect of 15 members of the FBU standing in elections against Labour members of the Fire Service Authority. We see Bob Waring, a principled MP in Liverpool, who stood against the war, having the disgraceful situation of Stephen Twigg, of all people, someone, I would argue, does not know much about Liverpool, essentially being imposed in a working class constituency on behalf of New Labour, now being prepared to stand alone. And we will see Respect candidates standing, and we will see other left-wing candidates standing. It shows us that out there is a resistance. And comrades, if we can play a part on bringing together those who want to resist, make the arguments in the trade union movement, in the communities, in all of those campaigns against war, for justice, against discrimination, and we can bring people together. And we can say the future is not about agree with this line 100% or we don't want you, but we want to work together. I tell you what, today could perhaps see the day when we reorientate our thinking. We recognise that what unites us is far more than what divides us. We rekindle our anger against the disgraceful way we are being treated. And we say unity in the trade union movement, unite the fight back, unity for those to the left of Labour who want a real alternative. We stand as Respect in the meantime, but we really work with others to ensure that when we get there, it is an alternative that gives Gordon Brown sleepless nights and gives our children the belief that there is something better for them in the future. Thanks very much.